Alrighty. Welcome everyone to our This Independent Life Expert Educational Session, which is our last educational session of 2023, which is crazy. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rebecca Lloyd. I'm the founder of This Independent Life. We do education and events on all things women's health. So working with organizations and workplaces on women's health in the workplace. So supporting women leaders to actually deal with their women's health issues and get back to building the career that they love. And then I also host events such as this, virtually and in person, on a variety of different topics on endometriosis, but also on all different types of women's health conditions and women's health related issues, because we know there's, it's not just one thing, we are complex beings. And I also have a podcast and do kind of various other bits and bobs. I actually spoke in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, just as a little selfish plug there, talking about policy. So it's very broad, but really for me, it's all about bringing together people to get support and to learn and just have access to more options. Just for a little bit of background before I hand over to Kirsty and Lindsay, I was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2021 after a 10-year journey of misdiagnosis and living in chronic pain, as many of you will relate to. I was working in a creative agency, had a very successful job on paper, just bought my first house, everything was good, but actually my health was completely shot. I had a complete mental health breakdown and had to have surgery, and all of these things kind of happened in the space of 6 months. And then a few months later, my symptoms started coming back, the pain started coming back. So for the last 18 months, I've sort of almost been back at square one. But the reason I started This Independent Life and started doing these sessions was really just to educate myself on the other options that are available, because as many of you will have probably had similar conversations with healthcare professionals, there are a lot of things that can help, such as what we're talking about today, functional nutrition, that unfortunately we're not always given access to through traditional health services, be that the NHS or, health systems in other countries. And so really it's about bringing different options and education so that we can have more understanding of our bodies and actually what is going on in our bodies, which a lot of us aren't taught in school. It's getting better, but we've definitely got a long way to go. And just helping people to really get the support they need so we don't have people living in pain and silence, and also feeling the support from others. Because for me, once I started connecting with other people who had experienced something similar to me, I found that on a very human level to be incredibly comforting and supportive. And so all that said, it's wonderful to have you here, and I really hope that you will walk away from this with some actionable information. I think it's great that we talk about inspiration and motivation, but I also really think it's important that we get practical tips and advice. So if you have any questions, please feel free to either unmute or post them in the chat. We will have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, and again, if you don't want to post it publicly, I appreciate this is a personal topic for many people, and many people who come to these sessions may never have actually been in a type of session like this before or spoken about it publicly. So I very much empathize with that, but please know this is a safe space. We are here to kind of love and support you without sounding super cheesy. So anything is welcome. Kindness is the only rule I have for This Independent Life. People always say, what are the rules? I'm like, there's no rules, just be a nice human being. And that's all we need to worry about. So with that, I will stop talking and hand over to our wonderful Kirsty and Lindsay, who will introduce themselves and then go through this fantastic session on functional nutrition for endo. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Rebecca. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, I'm not on mute. I normally am. So I'm Lindsay. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. And this is Kirsty. Up, down, left. We are two nutritionists who run Studio Nourish. We focus predominantly on male and female hormone health. We say male as well because males have hormones too. We all have hormones, and lots of our clients are males as well. But it covers lots of issues around the skin and the gut. We also focus on menstrual health related symptoms such as PMS, periods, anything to do with your cycle, and obviously the hormonal disorders such as endo and PCOS. And then also the various life stages such as conception and fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, and menopause. I've also got personal experience with endometriosis. I was diagnosed, probably it took about I don't know, maybe it was about 10 years as well. Went through, loads of ups and downs, lots of GPs, lots of pain and rolling around on my bathroom floor. So I've got my own personal experience. So I totally understand where things are with endo and the pain and how much that is. And since having my own child, I feel like if I can go through endometriosis pain, I can definitely go through childbirth, which you all can do. Right, so today we're going to cover how we work briefly, just because it gives you context of I guess this deck and this presentation, but how we kind of work, how we work with our clients. What endometriosis is, which a lot of you may know, but we're just going to share kind of our viewpoint and what research we've covered so far. The importance of our microbiomes, nutrition, the key nutrition, the key foods, the key lifestyle points, and then testing, which is a really important element as well.
Brilliant. So we were trained in nutritional therapy, and we use something called the functional medicine model when we work with clients. We apply this to our thinking. It's what helps us to put together our protocols for clients and make sure that everything that we do is very bespoke to that individual, because even if let's say a group of you have endometriosis, you might have different symptoms that present, you might have different lifestyles that maybe make the symptoms worse or better. So we try and look at you kind of holistically. And when we do that, we look at not just kind of like what food you're eating and your sort of general dietary habits, if you like cooking, if you don't like cooking, but we also think about, are you moving? How are you moving? What movements are good for your body? We think about your mindset. Do you have like a really strong sense of purpose? We look at the stress factors that come into play, because obviously we're all exposed to stress in some way or another, but we look at not just kind of stress that we get from work, but we look at physical stress in the body, whether that's through illness or through overtraining. And we also look at kind of environmental stress. So if you live in a city, for example, you'll be exposed to more pollution and things like that. And then lastly, we look at kind of emotional health and relationships. And then this kind of, once we have this picture of a client, we can sometimes recommend that they do some testing. So we'll get into testing later on, but we do functional testing, and that's things like blood testing. We do stool analysis, where we don't look at your poop, a lab does, but we would send off for a stool sample, and then we get information about your microbiome. And we also do urine analysis and hair analysis, and that can tell us a lot about what your body is excreting, and from a hair point of view, things like metal toxicity, any kind of chemicals that have built up inside the body. So yeah, it's a full, very comprehensive view of you as a person.
It basically gives us like the actual data of what's going on inside, which is so valuable when we're trying to pinpoint root causes, which is what we do. Okay, so just briefly, what is happening inside your body with endometriosis? So we know, hopefully everyone does know, endometriosis is the presence of this endometrial-like tissue outside of the uterus. So often in the pelvic region, such as the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and the rectum. We also see extra pelvic deposits around places such as the lungs and the knees sometimes, but these are less common. But essentially, this tissue responds to the natural hormonal cycle, so causing it to break down and then bleed. And because the blood has no outlet, this is what then leads to inflammation, pain, and the formation of scar tissue and adhesions. So endometriosis is a complex inflammatory disorder which affects about 5 to 10% of reproductive aged women. It's commonly characterized as an estrogen dominant syndrome, which we'll get into in a bit. And it also has it's got some connection to this progesterone receptor suppression, which that sounds a bit sciencey, but we'll get into that in a sec. But unfortunately, it takes around, on average, I think they're saying now around 9 years to diagnose, which is insane and terrible. So not good. And then these are the typical symptoms that we do see. They're by far not all of them. Out of interest, if anyone suffers from any other symptoms outside of what's on the screen now, would love to hear those. Kirsty, what did we hear the other weekend? There was a key one which I thought was really interesting. Can you remember?
Was it shooting pains down the leg?
No, there was that one. There was another one. Anyway, yeah, if anyone's got any others that quite big ones that they manage and deal with, we'd love to hear. But breathlessness. Oh wow, I've not heard that one before.
Also vomiting. A lot of people said that they pass out and vomit and then pass out, which is pretty severe. So
I think that the typical ones that we hear of that are on the NHS site and what we know of are obviously the heavy periods and clotty periods, and that serious chronic pelvic pain that I know so well myself.
And that's really interesting because as we'll cover in a second, that endometrial like tissue that Lindsay mentioned, it can get displaced and it can then obviously cause compression and pain in the chest as well. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So there are some big theories with endometriosis, and I think the reason why it's been really hard to get, one, a diagnosis, and two, a proper treatment plan. And ordinarily when you go into the doctors, if you are lucky enough to even get a diagnosis, you will then be given two options, the pill or pain management. And that just kind of shows us where we are in the journey with this particular condition, is that we just don't, there's not enough education yet from an NHS perspective. There are probably a handful of very, very good gynecologists, if you are referred to them, or endocrinologists that can support. But most GPs, unless they are maybe have experience of it or have someone in their family that maybe has experienced it, it's difficult to get help. And interestingly, we spoke to a girl who at an event recently who went to go and get she was trying to get a diagnosis. I don't think she knew what it was at that point. And the GP, he was a male GP, had said to her, I think I know what it is. And he ran away and he had this like massive folder, and he brought the folder back and he said, I think you might have two wombs. And she was like, what? Hang on a minute. 1 minute I'm being told that I might have to have a hysterectomy. The next thing I'm being told that I've got two wombs and that's what's causing the pain. But actually that was kind of the first stepping stone in her getting a diagnosis. So and that was probably only 4 or 5 years ago. So it shows you that we're really, it's still kind of in its infancy. But anyway, moving on to theories. So one of the oldest theories is this idea of a retrograde flow. So this was coined in the 1920s. And this kind of theory is about endometrial cells. So endometrial cells, it's hard to sort of show here, but at the top of the uterus there, where that first kind of like endometrial cluster is, this idea that where you've got that endometrial lining forming, as it sheds, rather than going down and out, it sort of sits inside the uterus and it pools. And so those endometrial cells kind of stay and they become a bit stagnant. And that then can become an issue. It hasn't become disproven, but there's been other theories since then that have kind of come to the fore, basically, as a bit more likely. So the next one is immune dysfunction. And this definitely is a key one with endometriosis. So your immune system is there's many tissues and organs and white blood cells involved in the regulation of your immune system. So you've got immune cells in your gut, you've got immune cells in your white blood cells, and ideally those immune cells are like an army. They should go after and destroy things like bacteria and viruses, or in this case any particular growths or cells that are replicating in a way that they shouldn't be. So with endometriosis, those cells are growing and building and proliferating, and they need to be controlled by the immune system, but that doesn't happen. And what happens is that causes an inflammation in the body, which then is like a cycle. It kind of then creates more inflammation. So that's one of the theories. The other one is metaplasia, which essentially is a fancy word for saying cell displacement. So you see how you've got those kind of yellow cells there. Those cells can kind of migrate. They don't just stay in the endometrial lining, but they move into maybe the top of the cervix or part of the ovary. It could be in the fallopian tube, or they might even migrate outside of the sort of reproductive system entirely. There's a really old, another kind of not old theory. There's another sort of theory around, and bear with me here because this is a bit hard to grasp, but when you were in utero, so when you were in your mother's uterus and you were forming, every cell in your body, as that kind of fetus starts to grow, cells start to differentiate. So you're basically a sack of cells. Some cells will become bone cells, some cells will become heart cells, some cells will become liver cells. And the theory goes that the endometrial cells that are forming, which should be in the uterus, start to form in joints. So it could be knee joints, it could be lungs, it could be brain. So when lots of women are kind of talking about issues with cognition or brain fog, or, you know, chest tightness or chest pain, joint pain, it might be because some of those cells in utero were displaced and they're going through that same kind of hormonal pattern. The other one is surgical scar implantation. So this is a real problem, because to actually get a diagnosis, you generally have to have I never get this word right. How do you say it?
Laparoscopy.
Laparoscopy. I can never say that word. And so by that very nature, it's quite an invasive process. And so as you're having a laparoscopy, maybe once, twice, maybe multiple times, that's causing scar tissue, which then leads to more immune response and more inflammation. And the last one is lymph fluid. So lymph fluid is essentially like a clear fluid. It runs kind of alongside our veins, and it helps to transport immune cells and waste from our body and lots of different things. But researchers essentially propose that the lymph is carrying old endometrial cells around the body, and that's why they're getting displaced. So there's many theories, and it just shows you that there's not been one single theory that's kind of been determined as the root cause. It feels like there's many, I guess, issues that are leading to this and progression in women.
So some typical causes, and probably more so risk factors. So prolonged estrogen exposure is one of them. We know endometriosis is estrogen dominant, is estrogen dependent. So estrogen dominant pictures are risk factors. So those being anyone who uses the oral contraceptive pill for a long time, we're pumping estrogen into ourselves. Genetically, we can be genetically susceptible or even set up to be producing more estrogen. I've recently had some genetic tests done. They're not the type of tests that you find out your heredity, where you come from, all of that. They're more around how your systems work around your body. They're really, really fascinating. And it turns out you can find out how your reproductive system is genetically set up, and whether they call them gene SNPs, which is essentially saying that alterations on genes. We all have genes, we all have gene SNPs, but it's dependent on where those SNPs sit, determines what pathways are kind of functioning less optimally, or poorly. And I've recently found out that I've got genetic SNPs all over my production of estrogen, which means I'm producing more estrogen than anybody else, than other people. I've also got SNPs on my liver genes, where you detoxify and break down and metabolize estrogen specifically, which means there's more circulating around me, because that function isn't working optimally. So again, functional testing shows us these really important kind of potential root causes, and it means in that I'm able to now support those specific pathways with the nutrients and cofactors that they need in order to be working optimally. Anyway, estrogen dominant. Poor estrogen detoxification, I've just touched on the liver detoxification, but basically detoxification pathways in our liver, there's 3 phases. They all need to be fully functioning. And often they're not, especially if we live in London in the city. So there's so much work to be done often around the liver and supporting liver health, regardless of whether you've got endometriosis or not. But funnily enough, we call out the liver on this slide, but actually it requires in order to have a less of an endometriosis picture, it involves actually proper functioning of our ovaries, which are our key producers of estrogen. We need our liver to be properly functioning, because they're the key metabolizers of estrogen, so where they're broken down. Our stomach, because our stomach acid is really important in absorbing the nutrients and cofactors that all of these estrogen pathways need in order to work. And if we're eating a really amazing diet, but our stomach acid is too weak, or we're essentially not absorbing this amazing food, then it's pointless even eating this amazing food in the first place. So the food is the one thing, getting the food right, but we have to optimize and ensure that your stomach acid is also as optimal, so to ensure that we're actually absorbing it all. Other places are the gallbladder, the intestines as well. Sorry, the gallbladder plays a big role in bile production, which is part of a pathway that takes the estrogen out of the body and forms it in the stool. Our intestines, so everything that's involved with our stool movements, we have to ensure that we're going to the toilet every day, so having a bowel movement every day, especially if we have a hormonal disorder, especially with estrogen dominance, because what happens is if you're sitting more on the side of constipation, there's these naughty bacteria in our gut, basically, that if you are constipated or you're not going at least once a day, they start, and your stool is sitting in your system and you're in intestines for longer than it should do, they start pulling out and extracting the estrogen from our stool that we need to eliminate and back into our system and recirculating them around our blood, which is another reason why we see estrogen dominant pictures. So some people's issues could simply just be working on constipation and getting you going to the toilet every day, and that could clear up your estrogen dominant picture alone. So there's quite a few things going on for endo in different ways that we would need to find out what your root causes are and where the issue's lying and all of this. So it's basically it's kind of this polyorganic process, and really important why we need to consider the health of the whole person, rather than just, it being focused on the reproductive system, which we now know is just totally not true. And then lastly, emotional trauma. There's papers, unfortunately, showing people who are diagnosed with endometriosis are more likely to have been diagnosed with a post-traumatic stress disorder. And I don't know if any of you know the links between sexual abuse and endo as well. So emotional trauma is one major one that's popping up too.
Mm-hmm. So inflammation is quite a broad umbrella thing, and if you have endometriosis, you will have a higher level of inflammation. And I think when you kind of, again, we mentioned this before, when you go to your GP, they just tend to kind of look at hormone blockers, so trying to reduce the amount of estrogen through taking the contraceptive pill, or pain management, but they don't always really address inflammation, because it's easy to address from a naturopathic point of view, but it's not that easy to address from a traditional conventional medicine point of view. So when we work with clients, we look at, what factors in their life might be increasing their inflammation, whether that's excessive use of antibiotics, whether that's being exposed to lots of pollutants in their environment. It could even be certain medications. It could be potentially even just stressful relationships and stressful jobs. Like, those things can cause more inflammation and cause immune issues. Environment and toxins I'll kind of cover in a little bit, because that talks all about endocrine disruptors, and I'll explain what endocrine disruptors are in a bit. And then the microbiome, Lindsay just touched on it, but you've got lots of different microbes in your gut, on your skin, in your mouth, all over your body, and they all talk to each other and they all communicate, and they're there to protect us. But when one is out of balance, it's called a dysbiosis. So you can have a dysbiotic gut, you can have a dysbiotic oral microbiome, you can have a dysbiotic vaginal microbiome, and if one of them is not quite working, it means that you're more susceptible to bacterial infections, viral infections, and just things like candida and thrush. So women that do have endometriosis are more likely to suffer from thrush as well. So we always look at how we can support a client's all of their microbiomes, basically, not just one. And then
on the topic of microbiomes, so there's 3 key microbiomes which have been associated with endometriosis. So we've got I'm going to remember these in the right order: urogenital microbiome, the gastrointestinal microbiome, the gut, and the vaginal microbiome. So our gut microbiome hosts the most microbes in our body. And there's an importance for this microbial balance and a healthy, flourishing microbiome, which is key to reduce the risk of these, this multiple microbiomes being disrupted, as Kirsty's just mentioned. So the imbalance in the gut microbiome, or what we call dysbiosis, it's the same word, has been implicated in a variety of human diseases, especially the gut. So in the case of endometriosis, there's been emerging evidence that's suggesting that there may be this urogenital gastrointestinal vaginal crosstalk that leads to the development of endometriosis. So this is when the bacteria is actually interlinking and interconnecting and translocating to different microbiomes across the body. These studies detected significant differences in this bacterial abundance in the gut microbiome among the endometriosis patients against the control group, actually highlighting specific bacterial groups that correlate with gastrointestinal symptoms in endo sufferers. So endo sufferers, potentially that it's showing that they have higher abundance of strains such as E. coli and Shigella and Lactococcus, but that's really interesting from a kind of lab perspective. And Kirsty and I work with a lab specifically actually who tests each. I think they've got the urinary microbiome, the vaginal microbiome, obviously the gut microbiome, but they don't have seminal in the UK yet. The oral microbiome as well, which is the last one, but these three are definitely covered, and we use that lab often with clients when we're looking at hormonal disorder pictures such as endo, but also fertility pictures and conception pictures, because microbiomes and crosstalk against vaginal and gut specifically have a huge part to play in the fertility picture. I was going to say that what causes imbalance here is those typical foods such as sugars, high sugar diets, processed foods, trans fats, which we'll get to in a sec, and obviously alcohol, but also body products such as shower gel that's not feminine friendly, I would say, or antibiotics and stress also alter your microbiomes too.
Yeah,
some of those things we can change ourselves, but some of them we can't.
I was going to say, we haven't got enough time to get into it today. We do a whole talk just about gut microbiomes, but when your gut microbiome your gut is always your primary, so it's the biggest microbiome that you have in your body. If that's out of whack, and you'll know it's out of whack, common symptoms are bad breath, like if you've got chronically bad breath, or halitosis as it's called, if you are very constipated, or if you're having very loose stools, if you get any kind of skin rashes, so any kind of like hives, things like eczema, itchy skin, things like that. But they're kind of signs and symptoms that your gut is slightly unbalanced. And if your gut is unbalanced, your vaginal microbiome is more likely to be unbalanced as well. So trying to actually heal the gut is the first step in trying to heal the vaginal microbiomes. Okay, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. We're going to talk a bit about nutrition and lifestyle now.
So this is the food. So this is essentially what we want your plates to look like. So you'll see that at a simple level, if all you go away with today is this plate, just make sure that you're putting 50% of your plate are vegetables. We've got a quarter of your plate, 25% of your plate as protein, your protein source, and then the last 25% is your kind of whole grain, starchy carbs. So firstly, protein. So we want to, I don't know how you guys were kind of brought up in the sense of food and meal times and stuff, but our family was very much like centered around let's make a rice dish, let's make a pasta dish, and it's all very carb focused first. So we're just looking at needing to flip that and make it protein focused first. Like, what is your protein? Are you having enough? The general amount per meal, and this is a general amount. Like, you can be quite specific with your personal protein based using this calculation using your body weight, which is essentially 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So you can work that out yourself. But it's basically 20 to 30 grams per meal at least. And that's anything from animal protein, plant proteins. And just a note on plant proteins, make sure that you're combining different plant proteins to get the complete versions, because plant proteins on their own, apart from quinoa, I think, and maybe mushrooms, are not complete. So you need to be having a mix. And then 8 colors. What else do I need to say about protein? Oh yeah, protein is essentially our building blocks of every single human cell in our body. So it's so vital to be getting enough of. 8 colors every day. So we say between 5 to 8. 8 sounds a lot, but actually in that 8 colors of vegetables a day, you can include herbs and spices. So go mad with herbs and spices. But just ensuring that you're predominantly choosing a good selection and good variety of vegetables each week in your basket. And we kind of try and give you this tip of every time you know, if you shop online or if you go to the farmer's market or the store itself, just choose one brand new vegetable that you don't normally cook with each week, and just try a new recipe, or just throw it or roast it. Everything mostly can be roasted, and that way you're expanding your gut diversity. So the more different foods you eat, the more you're feeding your gut and diversifying your bacteria, and essentially then that will be creating a really decent gut, really decent immune system. It'll be feeding into your hormones, so it all helps. And then omega-3 fats are so important for hormones. We often see people or clients with low omega fats in their diet actually suffer from more cramping. It's not the only thing that causes cramping, but the omega fats and healthy fats are one of the causes. So making sure that you're having some good good fats like flax seeds, ensuring that it's ground in your breakfast, for example, like 1 to 2 tablespoons. It needs to be that much. Or 3 oily fish a week. So the oily fish acronym we use is SMASH. So SMASH standing for sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. They're the 5 oily fish, most oily fish. So they're the kind of highest nutrient, kind of best quality oily fish. Resveratrol and quercetin they've been found, as science that's showing actually that they decrease the proliferation of cells. So particularly important in endo, which is a cell proliferative disorder. Over to you.
Quercetin?
I've done questions, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So fiber is really important. You'll always hear nutritionists and people on TV talking about fiber, but it's like, it is really important. And then you've got 2 types of fiber. You've got soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So soluble fiber tends to be, I don't know if you can see my little cursor here, but you can't, but it's kind of the fleshy part of fruit and veg. So for example, let's take a sweet potato. It would be the fleshy, soft part of the sweet potato. That's the soluble fiber, because it breaks down in the gut. The insoluble part would be the skin. And those 2 types of fiber have very different roles. So the insoluble fiber, so the skin is the hard part, that helps to bulk up the stool. It actually attracts, when it's actually in the intestine as well, it actually pulls water from the body into the colon to help form that stool and move it through the bowel. So it's very, very important. So if you don't eat the skins to your apple, or whatever, start incorporating them in there, because it's really, really good for you. And then the fleshy part is where we get a lot of our vitamins from. So that tends to incorporate a lot of the vitamins and minerals and those kind of things. So very, very good for you there. Phytoestrogens I'm going to cover in a second, because that's like a whole category in itself. You then have pre and probiotics. So to break this down, prebiotics are the food that the probiotics eat. So prebiotics are pretty much everything that you see on the left side of that plate. It's all of your different types of plant-based foods. You also have prebiotics in things like whole grain rice and kiwi, those kind of things. Probiotics tend to be a lot of your fermented foods. So it tends to be things like kimchi, sauerkraut, kefir, kombucha, a lot of K's, I don't know why that is. and miso as well. Really good quality miso paste is a good probiotic. So just having like a teaspoon of miso in hot water every day is a really great way to get a few more probiotics into your diet. You can also take a supplement, but if you're going to take a supplement, we kind of always recommend that you're getting a lot of the prebiotic foods as well. Otherwise, you're not going to have any, you're going to be starving the bacteria basically in that probiotic. So it's kind of pointless. Hydration is obviously really key. I think that's key regardless of endometriosis. We need to be hydrated in order for our body to function and for our cells to function. And then you've got this thing called aromatase inhibitors. This sounds very sciencey, and I'm going to break it down a little bit. So aromatase is an enzyme, and what it does is it converts the male sex hormones. So we have male sex hormones. We have something called androgens. Androgens make testosterone. But androgens in their basic form, when they meet aromatase, get converted. So that hormone gets converted into more estrogen. So not only are you producing estrogen already from your ovaries and from fat cells, but you're also going to be producing estrogen because of that conversion of androgens to estrogen. So it builds into that like excessive estrogen dominant picture. So estrogen dominance is very symptomatic of endometriosis. It's also very symptomatic of things like acne, of PCOS, of PMDD, of PMS, and you'll kind of be aware of this because it creates things like brain fog. It creates it can sometimes create weight gain. It can lead to loss of hair. It can lead to skin breakouts, poor mood, disrupted sleep. There's many symptoms. So the things that you can do to reduce aromatase or to kind of inhibit it, to stop it, are things like green tea. So green tea is really effective. Black tea is also quite effective, but try and get sort of good quality. Flaxseed, as Lindsay mentioned, not only has flaxseed got omega-3 in it, but it's got it's an aromatase inhibitor, so it helps to stop too much conversion. And licorice as well. So like the good quality licorice, not so much the sweets that you get. You can actually get licorice bark. You can also get a licorice tincture as well from, I think, Holland and Barrett and places like that, and you can kind of have a few drops of that. Although we don't generally recommend Holland and Barrett because their supplements are not great. And then lastly, you've got cruciferous vegetables. So cruciferous veg are like nature's medicine for hormone conditions. So cruciferous veg are essentially things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccolini. What else, Linz? I'm trying to think.
Cabbage.
All cabbages.
Cabbage, kale. Yeah.
Spring greens, that kind of stuff. They are so effective at helping to remove old estrogen, so excess estrogen and old estrogen from our bodies through our bowel. So even just having like one portion of that a day, whether that's grated red cabbage in a salad, whether that's sort of like lightly cooked Brussels sprouts in the evening with some chicken, just try and have that in every little meal if you can, and that's going to really help break down that estrogen and get it out of our body. So
can I just say something before we move on? Blitzing cauliflower, and if anyone has smoothies at all, but blitzing cauliflower in your smoothie, you actually can't taste it, I promise you. That's one. The other thing is, just I had a point to make on this. You see the whole grains in the bottom right. So these are really important. They are a source of insoluble fiber that Kirsty was talking about, so the bulking agent. But they're also where a lot of people go wrong, because we need to be focusing on the whole grain varieties of starchy carbs, such as whole grain pasta, brown rice rather than white rice, brown whole grain bread rather than white bread, because they have a lot lower sugar profile than the white varieties, and they're not processed. They're less processed, if you like. Some are processed a little bit with whole grain edifice or whatever, but they're more the ancient grains, if you like, which are a lot more nutrient dense than the white varieties, basically.
I'm just going to answer two questions that came up in the chat. So Vicky asked about, doesn't like fish, but does take an omega-3 supplement. Is that enough? So there's a bit of a debate at the moment in the nutrition world around omega-3 supplements that come from fish sources. There's a naturopath in Australia who's like very, very widely respected, and she has said that the quality of fish in our oceans now is very poor, because they're exposed to microplastics, they're exposed to pollution in the water, and the quality is just not great. And even wild Alaskan salmon is not as good as it could be. So she doesn't really eat a lot of fish at all, but you could get your omega-3 from things like flaxseed oil. You could also get it from avocado oil, which is a really good, make sure it's always cold pressed. I think you can even get omega-3 9, like a sea buckthorn oil, which is like a mixture. I think it's called Farmanord. So try and look for maybe some plant-based omega-3s as well, if you don't want to have fish oil, or you don't just want to rely on fish. Yeah, so that's one thing. And then Roshni, I think you asked about smoothies. So not technically, no, basically, to answer that question, smoothies are a really, really good way, a very quick way of getting lots of plant fiber into your diet. I think the trick is, don't get like a store-bought smoothie. Don't go to like Sainsbury's and get the what are they called, the brand, you used to get like Innocent Smoothies and the other one, can't remember its name now. Try and make your own, and if you're going to make your own, try and always do like a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 small handfuls or 3 small portions of veg, and then 1 portion of fruit. Don't make it all fruit based, basically. So
it's the fruit that spikes your blood sugar.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're adding like oils in it, like a coconut oil, you can add in a little bit of that, or a little bit of and some protein powder, then you're actually making a really beautiful protein rich snack as well.
And just on that as well, I made this mistake years ago, so I never knew this, but if you're just having like a green smoothie, so let's say you have spinach, water, maybe a banana, and I don't know, apple, and no fat, so no coconut oil, no nuts and seeds, no avocado. If you don't have any fat in a smoothie, your body actually can't break down the vitamins and things like spinach and greens. You need fats from your food to actually help absorb those vitamins. So essentially, you're just going to have a green smoothie and it will go straight through you. So always have a really good quality fat in every smoothie that you make.
And then protein powder recommendations as well. We've got a few actually, but Planet Paleo is really good, the original bone broth one. There are, Kirsty, I like there's Motion Nutrition do a really amazing 50-50 collagen split between marine collagen and bovine collagen. There's also hemp powder that you can buy quite easily from bulk stores. Kirsty, which one's the protein powder you like?
I like Form Nutrition. It's sometimes a little bit sweet, so I tend to get like a plain one. If you're on a budget, you could even get the plant-based version, hemp version from bulk, which does loads of different things. I would say don't go for whey though. If you're looking for a protein powder, if you're having lots of whey has lactose in it. Lac being the kind of dairy element, and the lactose is a sugar, so it breaks down as sugar, and that then causes the blood sugar spike. So always try and go for a plant-based one if you can. So just about phytoestrogen. So what's really interesting about phytoestrogens is every cell in your body, pretty much every cell, so brain cells, heart cells, bone cells, liver cells, they have this kind of like structure, and on the top, on the cell, they have something called a receptor. So you can see that little blue thing here. That's a receptor that sits on the outside of the cell, and it allows hormones to come along and dock into that receptor. And when they dock, that hormone exerts an effect on that cell. So it passes information back and forth, and then the cell, when it's finished with that hormone, the hormone detaches and it goes off into the blood, and then hopefully it gets eliminated through the body, through the bowel. If you have too much estrogen in your body, which tends to be the case in endometriosis, you've got too many estrogens docking and staying on that receptor for too long. It outstays its welcome. So what's really good about phytoestrogens, means plant, so phytoestrogens are plant estrogens. They're like our estrogen, but they live in plants. And when you consume those, they also dock to that receptor. They have the same kind of chemical composition or molecular composition as your natural estrogen. And so plant estrogens come from things like They come from beer, ironically, but I wouldn't say drink loads of beer. They come from beans, soybeans, grapes, berries, some peanuts. They're found in quite high amounts in sesame seeds. So if you've ever heard about seed cycling is really important because things like sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, they have their own phytoestrogens. And so it's really good because they kind of help to balance out your body's natural estrogens. So this is a really easy thing to incorporate into your diet. You could have ground up seeds or whole seeds on your cereal in the morning. You can have it in smoothies. You can have it as a salad dressing. Just stick it on anything, really. It's an easy, cost-efficient way to get plant-based estrogens into your diet. And that helps to balance your own. Right, Linz.
So this slide, hopefully you guys don't eat too much of, but it's just worth saying that these are the types of foods that our hormones absolutely hate, and they cause havoc with our hormones. So we would never eliminate these totally if they bring you joy and, you know, they're treat foods, for example. But even like the smallest change can make a big difference. But we just want you to know what your individual load is with when it comes to these types of foods, and also not to make the errors that we see a lot with choosing the types of, you know, starchy carbs that we that I was just pointing out earlier, and just trying to choose the brown and wholemeal variety. Obviously saturated and trans fats are just horrendous for endo, obviously beef burgers, chips and that type of thing. And antibiotics, we're definitely not telling you not to have them. If you need them, for sure have them, but just be mindful of, you know, just having them just so, you know, as the only option, basically, because they do all alter our hormone pathways and how our hormones work, and also how our gut, the health of our gut. So yeah. And if you do enjoy kind of wine in the evenings and stuff, maybe try and make that just the weekends, and, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah. Or good quality red. We don't have an issue with good quality red. Xenoestrogens. I don't know if you guys have heard of these. This is what we call an endocrine disruptor. So your endocrine system is all of the glands and the tissues in your body that make your hormones. So in the context of this discussion, your ovaries make most of your estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And endocrine disruptors will affect how many of those hormones you produce. It might increase the amount that you make, it might decrease the amount that you make, and it might also just interact with those hormones and cause havoc, basically. So just like phytoestrogens, which are the plant compounds, xenoestrogens are essentially like external toxic estrogens. They also bind to our receptors, which is a problem. So they are in things like plastics. So that's why people obviously tell you to kind of avoid single-use plastics, because they're very in high amounts in those. They're in our tap water, unfortunately. They are in pesticides that get sprayed onto crops. They're in our birth control pills, which doctors weren't aware of, and yet we've been on birth control for as long as we can remember. They're in a lot of our cosmetics and personal care products as well. And so endocrine disruptors and microplastics have now been found in, endocrine disruptors are just in everything, but microplastics have now even been found in human blood, which just shows you how small they are and how prolific they are in our food chains, in our environments, basically. So the problem with these is that because they affect our hormones, it leads to things like reproductive issues. So it can cause preterm birth issues. It can cause fertility issues. It can also lead to birth defects. So even microplastics have been found in amniotic fluid around the baby. So if that's what the baby is interacting with, that's its kind of first interaction with the world, and it's a chemical world, unfortunately. And, you know, most commonly it leads to hormone imbalances. So it's a real problem, and we're all exposed to it, unfortunately, but you can control the level of exposure that you have, and you can do this through some simple means. So things that we always advise our clients is to just wash fruit and veg. Like if you can get organic fruit and veg, amazing. Like even for me, I tend to get a lot of stuff non-organic, but for the most part I'll get a simple organic box once a week delivered. And my trade-off is that, okay, well, if I don't go out once this week, or I don't know, if I don't buy those jeans that I really want, and instead I get some good organic veg, I'm feeding my body with really good quality fruit and veg that has been grown in soil that is nutrient dense and it's not sprayed with chemicals. If you get non-organic veg, just make sure that you wash it really well. So stick it in a sink with some baking soda or bicarb of soda. I think it's bicarb of soda, sorry. And it just helps to kind of lift the dirt off. So just leave it in there for 10-15 minutes, and that kind of takes the grime off of it. And obviously wash it before you cook with it as well. Google the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. So if you haven't heard of this, every year the EWG, so the Environmental Working Group, which is a global platform, it releases something called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And this is the cleanest fruit and veg that you can buy that is not sprayed with a lot of pesticides and chemicals. And then the 12 fruit and veg that are, so tends to be things like cabbages, leafy greens, those kind of things, because they're kind of above ground and they're more susceptible to getting sprayed. Things like bananas, for example, that are in a skin are a little bit more protected, so have a look at that. Also opt for natural cleaning products, so whether that's just swapping out for a natural soap or natural hair products. There's a really good brand called bloody hell, what's it called? We Are Plant Made. So it's a female-led brand. She's a Londoner, and she created a completely plant-based shampoo bar for hair and for beards, and it's great. So really, really, really clean. And try and avoid plastics where possible. So even if you've got like a plastic refillable container, just try and get a metal water bottle or a glass one. Make sure that you try and don't use too much plastic when you reheat food or when you're getting takeaways, those kind of things. Always try and heat food up in a pan and not Tupperware. Invest in a good water filter if you can. You can actually get these water filters now that attach. They're really easy to install, but they attach to the bottom of your water pump and then into your kitchen. So that's really an easy solve. Or you can get charcoal and you can put that in water bottles. If you're someone that loves to get shellac nail appointments, maybe think about just like decreasing the amount of appointments that you have, or just trying to go a bit more natural. Check ingredients on everything. So make sure that you, like these kind of products here with the little microplastics in them, like get rid of those. If you're someone that's using things like Femme Fresh or in sort of like, feminine washes, do away with it. Like just try and use like really natural products if you can. And then if possible, try and opt for natural deodorants and lubricants, things like Durex lubricants. They're full of phthalates, which are very, very toxic to the body. So you can look for things like jojoba oil or coconut oil and things like that. And then the really easy thing that you can do is just more house plants. So spider plants, snake plants, gum plants, they all are air purifying. So if you have those in your front room or your bathrooms, that's going to help to really make the environment in your houses a lot safer.
Can I just add, there's a company called Day who do organic CBD tampons and kind of period wear. Also, there's an app, some of you might have heard of it, called Yucca, which you can scan all of your skincare and products to see how bad it is in terms of its toxicity and, I don't know, crappy ingredient level. There's also the EWG that Kirsty mentioned, which is a site. I think they've also got an app that you can do the same. And that's really worthwhile using. So lifestyle points, we've got movement. So reducing excessive exercise, because unfortunately, like doing hardcore HIIT and cardio throughout the week, more so than not. If you are stressed, which we see a lot, you're essentially doing more damage than good, because exercise can turn into a stressor to your body, and it can stress out an already stressed out system if you're not balancing it with the kind of moderate movements of things such as yoga and Pilates, which are a little bit more restorative. And the weight and using weights is really nice as well. It's not so hard, it doesn't have the cardio HIIT element, but you're improving bone density and etc. that way. And then I've put bowel movements a day under here as well, because we really need to stress the point of just making sure that you're going to the toilet every single day for endometriosis. Acupuncture was one of the things. So nutrition actually is the reason I got into being a nutritionist in the first place. In terms of the food I was finding, I was doing so much research for my own endo, that actually food was the turning point for what was changing my symptoms. And then later on down the line, I ended up using acupuncture, which totally took my pain away from it being like 100 level down to a normal, mild period pain, which I didn't even need a hot water bottle for. The beauty of acupuncture is it addresses blood stagnation, which is what causes that inflammation and pain in the first place, and it opens up your energy meridians in a really beautiful way, and it also regulates your menstrual cycle and relieves stress on top of that, which is what can cause the pain or aggravate the pain as well. And other manual therapies such as reflexology I'd highly recommend too. Managing your stresses. So there's obviously a huge amount of stresses that we can't manage, we have no control over, but the ones that we can do a huge amount for ourselves. And whether that can be turning off your notifications on your phone, or reducing them, or reducing the amount of platforms you're on, or just simple breathing techniques throughout the day. Doing alternating nostril breathing just a couple of minutes before you eat actually flicks your vagus nerve from this your sympathetic nervous system into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system in our body that initiates digestion. So if you haven't switched on your parasympathetic nervous system, you will not and cannot digest the food that you're eating. So if you're stressed and you're eating on the run, or by your desk, or doing emails at the same time, you're just not digesting. The food will come out in your stools. You won't be absorbing any of the amazing food that you're eating. I think I laboured that enough. And then 15-minute walks throughout the day are lovely, just even after meal times, because that actually helps with blood sugar levels as well. Castor oil packs. I don't know whether any of you have heard of castor oil packs. They're brilliant. So they promote the blood flow basically to our reproductive organs, but you can put it over your ovaries if you have. They help with cysts, moving cysts and fibroids, but they more specifically help with liver detoxification and helping your liver pathways with detoxifying the hormones, breaking them down properly and eliminating them from your body. They're really, really effective. Not to do them while you're on your period, so it's outside of your period only. And prioritizing sleep is such a major one for hormones. Sleep is when all of our hormones are regulated, all of our and that's hormones, not just your sex hormones, but also your blood sugar hormones like insulin, your hunger and satiety hormones, which manage when you're hungry, when you're not, all of them, mood hormones, all of them. So sleep is such a important one. And yeah, that's it.
Got it. So testing, I briefly spoke about this at the beginning, but this is actually very complicated, but this is called a Dutch test. So Dutch test looks at urine. It's the dried urine analysis. And there's different ways that you can do this, but the most common one, that I've done, that Lindsay's done, is you pee on a strip of paper 5 times a day from morning to evening, and you send it off to a lab, and it can tell us as practitioners how somebody is breaking down hormones, so what sex hormones they're excreting and in what levels. So if they maybe have too much estrogen, we can tell that. If they have too much cortisol, so if they're extremely stressed, we know how much they're producing and at what peaks in the day that might be producing. And we can also look at kind of like the male hormones as well. So all sorts of different things that can tell us. We also do a lot of blood testing. So we do female health panels. These are a lot more in depth, but they look at the active hormones in the body. So they look at how much estrogen you're producing, how much testosterone you're producing, what is your level of inflammation, what is your level of toxicity. We can also look at thyroid hormones as well. So thyroid is really important. Thyroid gland sits just on your neck here, and this has a really big interplay with your sex hormones. So that can tell us a lot. And then, of course, you've got stool testing. This tells us like how your microbiome is functioning. And if your microbiome has issues, then we can probably guess that your vaginal and uterine microbiomes might also need support.
And this is just a final slide to just kind of, endometriosis is a really it's a long road to treating it, or it can be, because there are so many reasons, so many what do you call it, systems that play into that root cause. So finding the root cause takes us a little bit longer than anything else, really, because there's a lot of systems at play, and I hope hopefully given you an idea of the types of systems that you need to look at supporting and ensuring, and not just focusing on the reproductive system alone, but just, you know, your microbiomes, your inflammatory markers, your immune systems, etc. So yeah, it's a complete lifestyle change for endo, unfortunately, and if you did go all out, guns blazing, like to totally cut out and eliminate the sugars and trans fats, you'd get there a lot quicker. But yeah, that's it, I guess. Thanks for listening. And are there any questions? I don't know if there are any time for questions, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, guys. That was incredible. I was making extensive notes and do have a bunch of questions, but yeah, we are a bit over, but I'll turn it over. I know we answered a few along the way. Does anyone have any on the line? Feel free to put it in or unmute and ask the question, whatever's easy, if you've got a couple of minutes. If anyone has any burning questions, I'll send the details as well of Kirsty and Lindsay afterwards. So if anyone does, and Roshni, are you taking on new clients? I'm sure the answer is yes.
Yes, we are definitely in the endometriosis zone for sure. Yeah. Rebecca's going to send around our links and information, so get in touch from those and we can chat to you.
Yeah, I'll send all the details. Noma, sorry, I may be pronouncing that wrong. You have a question? Do you want to unmute, or do you want to?
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Got my camera on just because it's
Don't worry,
day
you don't
one.
have to explain.
I'm not looking great.
You look fabulous.
I just had a question about, I know obviously the root causes of endo we know some, but there seems to be a bit of mystery around them. Everything that you mentioned seems to point back to kind of stress and cortisol, whether it's relationships or a biological function. It all seems to come back to stress and cortisol, really. Is there any other reason why someone would get endo? Because I've heard there could be histamine issues, histamine intolerance issues, and things like that. So I wonder if there's, I don't know, a pathway or some other non-stress related reason.
Funnily enough, Lindsay, you're probably the best person to answer this, aren't you?
Well,
we had a slide in the deck previously, but we didn't have enough time to cover it. But yeah, histamine's a big one.
Yeah, histamine's a big one. There are lots of different, well, it seems on the table there are lots of different avenues you can have genetic susceptibility to endo and estrogen dominance in the first place, which doesn't help your picture at all. Stress obviously feeds into it, but as we've kind of explained, there's a huge amount of different aspects that can feed into endometriosis picture. Diet, poor diet, it's not just one thing. There's from what we see and how we treat as well, it's a variety of things that kind of mesh together and exacerbate each other, and then this kind of endometriosis picture starts forming. Well, it's more an estrogen dominance picture, I guess. Apart from the theories that we've run through at the start, there's not, and yet there are others outside of just the stress picture. So being the immune dysfunction and the cell displacement. So no, it's not just a stress picture. There are lots of things that are feeding into it. I don't know whether you've got anything to add, Kirsty, on that. It's a chronic inflammatory disorder from a variety of different inflammatory, factors, I guess.
You have, we talked about cells, and you have receptors. Is this right? You have receptors on the cell that can, the more estrogen that you produce, the more, you're going to have to remind me how this works now from a mechanical point of view, but is it that the more estrogen you produce, the more that histamine docks to the estrogen? Is that right, Linz?
Yeah.
Docks estrogen. And it can, like Lindsay said, it can just cause more of an inflammatory response and more of an immune response. So it is quite difficult. But there are certain things you can do to not suppress the immune system, because you don't want to suppress it, you want to kind of work with it. But quercetin's a really important one. So quercetin is a plant compound that you find in onions and apples and things like that. It's you can take it as a supplement as well, but it's a really powerful plant compound that you can take kind of before hay fever. So if you're someone that has endometriosis, you're probably more likely to be susceptible to things like hay fever and kind of, flu allergy season. A really good probiotic is important as well, because your immune system is housed in your gut. So if you are someone that has endo or like kind of hay fever and those kind of things, a probiotic can kind of help to lessen the effects of that. But you've got to kind of take it you've got to sort of go at it for a few months before you get to that point. But yeah, there are a lot of links now with histamine and endometriosis. I think,
which is very much a factor of the immune system. Yeah.
I think someone meant Tanyelle's, I think maybe we spoke to you the other day, I don't know. Do you have any tips for chronic UTIs or cystitis? So
I think it's key to know your trigger foods and eliminate those firstly. There are some like bladder friendly foods as well, such as like green vegetables and lean proteins and non-citrus juices. But we would generally advise on having a urinary microbiome test done so we can see exactly what's going on, because obviously it's made up of probiotic picture, so we'd like to see like what strains you've got. If they're chronic and they come back often, there's definitely an imbalance there with your bacterial strain. So that would be a few things to do.
The reason why women get so many UTIs is because the urinary tract is only about 4 centimeters in women. In men, it's about 20. And so like if you have a dysbiotic bowel, so like a gut, or you have a dysbiotic vaginal or cervical environment, that bacteria from both sides can actually go into the urethra, and that's what causes more and more UTIs. So having a probiotic for both the gut and for the vagina and for the urinary system can be kind of a 3-pronged attack at supporting that. Any more questions?
I think Vicky said she'd like to talk to us about something, but when Rebecca shares the information, our information and email, we can arrange a chat with you then. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you on that.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I won't keep you.
Oh, you've done it already.
We'll be chatting again soon anyway, but thank you so much. This has been incredibly useful, and I feel like so knowledgeable and very, very jam-packed in such a short space of time. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope you found it useful. I've sent some links I've got one upcoming event on the 11th of December, and I'm in the midst of 2024 planning, as I'm sure the Studio Nourish team are as well. So yeah, I'll send a follow-up link to everything so you can get in touch with me and with them. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to help. And yeah, it was so wonderful to see you all. I hope you all have a lovely evening, and excited to hopefully see you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.